Welcome. We're glad to see you folks here. My name is Susan Schrader, and I'm going to open up our forum and introduce the participants who will be our speakers. And so I'm a domestic well owner. That is my big claim to fame. I don't have any background in water resources or any of that, so it's all been new to me over the last 3 or 4 years, and it's been quite a journey, and I have come to appreciate how complex but how important it is. So if I can learn about it, you can learn about it. And I want to, last time we were here, people said, oh, the terminology, the acronyms, but there is a beautiful pamphlet, 4 pages of terminology right over there on the sideboard that Christina Buck from Butte County Department of Water Resources brought in, so please help yourself. There's a lot of great information over there which you can have access to, at the end as well. Okay, so welcome. I'm going to introduce our speakers first. The first one is Marty Dunlap, who's sitting in the back there trying to be very quiet. Marty is a public interest attorney who has lived in the region for over 50 years. You can't believe she's that old, let me tell you. She's been attending to water issues of the North State since 2003, and she chaired a group entitled Citizens Water Watch of Northern California and has represented the public interest while serving on the Lower Tuscan Coordinating Group orchestrated by Northern California Water Association and on the Cal Water Citizen Advisory Committee. So she's got an extensive background in all this. Then we have Blake Ellis. Here's Blake right over here. She received her master's in social work from Chico State, and for the past decade, Blake has been working at the intersection of human and environmental health. She has taught outdoor and garden education, provided horticultural therapy to adults with developmental disabilities, and now provides a nature-based mental health therapies to individuals impacted by catastrophic wildfire. Blake is a Type 2 wildland firefighter and passionate about stewarding local landscapes. She is a domestic well owner, an avid gardener, and an outdoor enthusiast who is proud to protect this place we are lucky enough to call home. And then there's Aurelia Gonzalez. She holds a BS in biology and an MS in natural resources and environment management. With a background in aquatic ecology, she currently implements salmon restoration projects locally for the Sacramento River Forum. Apart from her profession, her work focuses on nature-based solutions and expanding public access to environmental data to strengthen water resource decision-making. She has collaborated with municipal and government agencies in Hawaii on green infrastructure strategies for flood mitigation. Wow, they could use that now, huh? She recently created a groundwater recharge prioritization web tool for the Vina Subbasin and continues to focus on making improved management decisions within the Vina GSP. And then we have Cheetah Chudy. Where's Cheetah? He's in the back with the cap, the proverbial cap. He is a farmer and a consultant that has been working in the fields of agronomy, conservation ecology, and mycology for over 20 years. He works as a groundwater community engagement contractor for the Community Alliance with Family Farmers, educating growers about local SGMA implementation and providing irrigation and technical assistance. And finally, we have Cindy Daly. She is the director of the Center for Regenerative Agriculture at CSU Chico. There she is right there. She's working with farmers of all backgrounds and persuasions. She meets them where they are. They talk about different strategies. She said they're agnostic in terms of they're not going to align with one side or the other. She went to University of Illinois and got a degree in agronomy, and then she came out and did her graduate work at UC Davis, and now she's landed in Chico. So she'll be our expert on demand. What is it called? demand strategies.
Reduction.
Demand reduction, thank you. Okay, so. Okay, how do we make it go? How do we make it go? Oh, we do that, okay. So, we're going to do a quick little recap of form number 1. The first thing to remember is groundwater is out of sight, out of mind, and we don't want it to be out of mind. In the Venus subbasin, groundwater makes up 85 to 90% of the total water supply. That's a lot. And groundwater storage in the Venus subbasin has been decreasing by 20,000 acre-feet per year over the past 25 years. So the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, or SGMA, requires that we correct that deficit to protect the beneficial users of groundwater, which includes farms, residences, industries, and ecosystems. And the question, where do we come up with that 20,000 acre-feet per year? And the purpose of these forums is to inform you, the public, about the importance of groundwater and the decisions that are being considered in how it is to be managed going forward into the next 5 years. An educated, informed public can make suggestions for amendments to the groundwater sustainability plan based on factual information as to the best ways to make up that 20,000 acre-feet deficit per year. We need the support of the public to ensure that all stakeholders are included in the next development phase. So last week we looked at recharge, and that is, you take water from the surface and somehow you get it into the ground. And there's 3 methods of recharge. There's natural recharge. This is the simplest and least expensive method to recharge groundwater. This can happen through precipitation, seepage from creeks and rivers, and applied irrigation water. For the most part, the depth of the recharge is constrained to the upper water table. And then you have enhanced or direct. And this is redirecting floodwaters or excess runoff to broader areas for slower percolation, or directing floodwaters to ponds or other ways of pursuing natural recharge. So there's the recharge basins. We looked at those. You can see, we have the little thing.
I don't think we do have one today.
We don't have the little, okay. No. Well, on there you can see the recharge canal and the conveyance canal and the infiltration basin. Those are all things that get built to capture the water. There's also the reverse tile drains, and now they have dry wells that they're talking about where you can inject water and it'll flow out into the aquifer. But those require things that get built, and they require money, and they require maintenance. But that is a method. Those are methods of recharge. And then there is this last one on the list called direct injection, and that is also called aquifer injection. And it is water injected into the aquifer system, and you can see that one well that says an injection well right over there. Okay. So it is relatively expensive. Those wells are expensive, and it has not been practiced in Northern California. The water to be injected must be treated before injection so it is free of turbidity, biomatter, bacteria, and viruses, and the chemistry of the water must be compatible with the chemistry of the water in the aquifer. And due to the precarious nature of contamination of the existing aquifer, this method is not endorsed by the environmental community of North State. Now, then we have in lieu recharge. And that, you're using surface water in lieu or in place of groundwater. This method moves surface water to areas that generally have been dependent on groundwater for agricultural purposes. It reduces demand on groundwater pumping and seepage and that can occur in the upper water table. This type of recharge can be quite complex and will incur significant expense as water conveyance facilities need to be constructed and the high cost of purchasing surface water. Additionally, the loss of property owners' legal rights to pump groundwater on their own can be jeopardized. And the in lieu also leads into conjunctive water management. And this is a method when surface water and groundwater are used in a manner to complement the availability of surface water. When there is less precipitation and surface water isn't available to meet the water demands, then groundwater is depended upon to meet the demands. This also can be referred to as water banking, when an underground aquifer is used like a reservoir. When there is a lot of precipitation, the excess surface water can be injected into the aquifer for later use when the surface water is not plentiful, like during a drought. This method generally requires the emptying out of an aquifer, so space exists for the injection of surface water. And this method also can put the overlying property owner's rights in jeopardy, and the precarious aspect of injecting water into the aquifer was mentioned previously, and that is problematic. And then there's one more, groundwater substitution, or the old double dipping. Although not defined as a recharge method, it bears mentioning due to its impact on the pumping of groundwater. Groundwater substitution is when a property owner that has water rights for the beneficial and reasonable use on their land, and instead of using it to, water their crops, the surface water is not used on the land but sold elsewhere, and then the property owner pumps groundwater for use on the overlying land. So that's that's the double dipping thing right there. Okay, and let me see. Okay, so challenges to a successful recharge project. First of all, you have to have willing landowners. You just can't come in and say, we're going to build a canal right through your land. Expensive construction of conveyance facilities requires an agreed upon water accounting system. Like, how do you really know? If I'm buying 10,000 acre feet, how do we know that 10,000 acre feet really ended up where it's supposed to? It's a challenge. And it requires clear delineation of ownership and water rights. Okay, so these are the VINA grant-funded recharge studies right now. You can see that the first two, the South VINA extension and Ridge to Valley, those are both in lieu, where you're going to take surface water and you're going to take it down a conveyance, some kind of conveyance facility, and spread it on rice lands. Then they have a recharge basin for the storm flows up on Rock Creek. And that's a recharge. They have the Central Vina candidate sites, and that storm flows off of Comanche Creek. And they're looking at reverse tile drains in active orchards, and that's where you put the pipe at an angle, and then the storm water goes in, and then it flows under the roots of the tree, and it recharges the aquifer. And the same, they're also talking about doing dry wells where they drill down and they do the same thing, and the water can go underneath the roots of the tree. And then Lindo Channel, augmented stream flow. When you get a big flow on Big Chico Creek, like during a storm, if you make more water go down Lindo Channel, are we going to get recharge? So those are the projects that the VINA district is looking at right now. And you can see that a lot of them are to be determined. So, how much potential recharge there is, they're not sure, and none of them have penciled out the costs. So everything's still up in the air. And, it's going to be coming together as the months go on through the summer. And let's see, so now the subject of the night is demand reduction, and we're going to start with a little slide of demand reduction of Chico. And I'm going to go right to this one. Okay, there we go. All right. So it took me a while. It's a little confusing, but if you look on the right-hand side, that's the population, and it's the blue line. And you can see that the population started off at about 100,000 in 2010, that's the blue line, and then it went straight up well, at an angle, but it, pretty much the same all the way through to 120,000 in 2025. And then the green line is the use of water. And we started off at about 26,000. Ignore the population side and just look on the left. It started off about 26,000, and then, it was pretty high. And then when we started having droughts, it went low. It went real low in 2015 as the people in the city that use Cal Water Service really cut back on their water use. And then it climbed a little bit, and then it went back down, and now it's settled at about maybe 21,000. So overall, we had a 23% increase in population, but a 22% decrease in groundwater withdrawals. So the Cal Water people, which is a lot of the city of Chico, we're already practicing demand reduction. And that's kind of the nice thing. You can build all these recharge projects and stuff, but what if we just didn't need so much water in the first place, Then that might even be the least expensive way to bring us into sustainability. And that's going to be the subject for tonight. Why? Okay. And I introduce Blake.
I'm going to dive right in and just start with some basic groundwater 101, just to make sure we're all on the same page. So groundwater, quite simply, is water stored beneath the Earth's surface, which fills pores and cracks in the soil, sand, and rock to form these underground reservoirs called aquifers. Now, a groundwater basin consists of one or more connected aquifers that are contained within naturally defined boundaries. And then we have subbasins. These are smaller sections of a groundwater basin that are divided by either geological, hydrologic, or political boundaries. So on the map here, you can see that in Chico, we are part of the Vina subbasin, which relies on the underlying Tuscan aquifer system for its groundwater supply. So why protect groundwater? Well, for one, if we don't protect groundwater, our wells could go dry. Domestic and small farmer ag wells could go dry and cause reduced pumping capacity, which would increase pumping costs and force domestic well users or owners to deepen or replace wells. It impacts our drinking water. Groundwater serves as a critical source of municipal, industrial, and domestic drinking water throughout the county. And across the state, approximately 33 million Californians use groundwater for drinking water or other household uses. We risk land subsidence, which is the sinking of the Earth's surface, which can cause structural damage to our infrastructure, increase flood risks, and permanently degrade our aquifers. And of course, there's property values. If you don't have access to water, your property value is going to go down pretty quickly. Reduced flows and surface water. Surface water just refers to things like rivers, streams, and creeks. And these support our beloved aquatic and riparian ecosystems. Then, of course, we have our groundwater-dependent ecosystems, or GDEs. These amazing ecosystems support about 1,500 species of plants and animals. So these species depend on groundwater to survive. Then, we are called the city of trees here in Chico, but if our groundwater levels drop too much, we really risk losing all of our urban forests and trees. Because especially in dry years, many of those trees are not irrigated. And most of our urban trees rely heavily on groundwater. And our valley oak tree has the maximum root depth of 80 feet below the surface of the ground, which is the deepest root system. But usually urban trees are only about 40 feet below the Earth's surface. So when groundwater levels drop below the rooting depth, those trees will die pretty rapidly. Then, of course, agriculture. We all require food to live, and we need food security. But of course, most of the land that is dedicated to ag is growing nuts and rice, and up to 70% of the nuts grown or exported out of the state or out of the country. Across California, agriculture uses 80% of the developed water, but only contributes about 2.5% to the state's GDP. For greater context, most of California's developed water is transported via the State Water Project. On average, this delivers about 7 million acre-feet to the Sacramento and San Joaquin Valley cropland. But 8 million, just 1 million more acre-feet, is enough to serve all other water users, that includes household, industrial, and commercial, for 5 years. So when I talk about ag, I'm not talking about small farmers. I'm talking about industrial agriculture, corporate giants, and investment farms. I personally wish we had more farmers because we have an opportunity here to grow enough food to feed the entire North State. But most of our cropland is dedicated to really thirsty nut crops. And it's only getting tougher to be a small farmer. As we know, within the Vina Subbasin, we found that 4% of landowners own over 43% of the land. So one of the largest landowners in our county is actually the Mormon Church headquartered in Salt Lake City, Utah. So these are the giants that are the biggest groundwater users in our state and in our county. So SGMA, also known as the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. This is a 2014 California law, and its stated goals are sustainability and local control, which has led to the creation of hundreds of local groundwater sustainability agencies tasked with developing these things called groundwater sustainability plans. This describes their path for reaching groundwater sustainability by approximately 2040. Unfortunately, though, many groundwater sustainability agencies have been dominated by historic powers in the region, and the implementation of plans as currently developed would favor those with the strongest voices, the most money, and the most political power. For the past 100 years, groundwater pumping has been at a greater rate than what naturally replenishes, which is no surprise because before SGMA, there was no law regulating groundwater use. And overpumping has caused falling water tables, desertification, land sinking, and water quality problems. So under SGMA, these groundwater sustainability agencies are formed by local public agencies, such as water districts, cities, and counties. And they're there to manage high or medium priority basins. Basins are ranked on priority based on population size, projected growth, number of wells, irrigated acreage, and their reliance on groundwater. The GSAs, or Groundwater Sustainability Agencies, must write groundwater sustainability plans. These are local plans that outline how they will achieve long-term groundwater sustainability. They set clear measurable standards, including what counts as an undesirable result. Also the minimum levels of groundwater that must be maintained, as well as the goals the basin aims to reach. If undesirable results recur, they must be corrected through specific projects and management actions. SGMA also gives GSAs real authority. They can monitor wells, limit pumping, and charge fees to manage groundwater. So what are those undesirable results? Well, SGMA lays out 6 of them. And so these are really, they say, you have to manage groundwater in a way that can continue in the long term without causing serious problems or, again, undesirable results. Those 6 results that are undesirable under SGMA are 1, lowering of groundwater levels, 2, reduction of groundwater storage capacity within aquifers, 3, seawater intrusion, 4, water quality degradation, 5, land subsidence, and 6, depletion of interconnected surface water that have an adverse impact on beneficial users of the surface water. Put simply, it can drain rivers, creeks, and streams. Now, who are those beneficial users I was talking about? Under SGMA, or the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, groundwater sustainability agencies are required to prevent adverse impacts to all beneficial users when establishing their sustainable management criteria. Those beneficial users include agricultural users, domestic well users, municipal operators, public water systems, tribes, disadvantaged communities, and environmental users. However, the current VINA GSP, or Groundwater Sustainability Plan, does not analyze direct or indirect impacts on disadvantaged communities when defining their undesirable results, nor does it evaluate the impact of proposed minimum thresholds or establish measurable objectives for groundwater elevation and water quality. This is especially concerning given the lack of firm plans for a drinking water and well mitigation program. The Groundwater Sustainability Plan mentions groundwater-dependent ecosystems, but does not actually analyze them when defining undesirable results. And it fails to evaluate how proposed thresholds and goals would affect those levels of water quality and surface water supplies. So that's sustainable management criteria. What are the items in that? So the GSAs must set these numbers. We've got minimum thresholds, which is defined as a set number that shows the lowest acceptable groundwater condition at a monitoring site or a monitoring well. If groundwater levels go past this point, it could lead to serious problems in the basin or those undesirable results. Measurable objectives are defined as the basin's quantifiable goal for maintenance or improvement of groundwater conditions. This is the groundwater level we're aiming to achieve. This is the goal. And then we have interim milestones. This is the 5-year target used to track progress towards our measurable objectives. So I've got a really oversimplified graph that kind of illustrates what each of these items are. So as you can see, the blue line, that is our groundwater levels over time. The orange line is our minimum threshold. Again, that's the point at which we say that if the groundwater levels drop below this point, undesirable results will start to occur. The blue star on this graph is our measurable objective, or our goal. This is what we're aiming to achieve. Now, in between the minimum threshold and measurable objective is what we call our margin of operational flexibility. This is our buffer. This margin allows groundwater sustainability agencies to actively manage the basin, especially during drought years or unexpected spikes in demand, without breaching those minimum thresholds and ensuring sustainability over time. And then again, those interim milestones are those blue dots marked in 5-year intervals to mark that progress toward meeting our goals. So I wanted to show you a hydrograph of the current GSP at a monitoring site near my home. I chose this monitoring site only because it is about a block away from where I live. So as you can see, the top brown dotted line is the ground surface elevation. You can see there that the measurable objective is our green line on this graph, and our minimum threshold is the orange line. Those blue crazy dots are the water levels, groundwater levels over time. I've also superimposed a valley oak tree urban forest and my own well. I have one valley oak tree that I love very much in my yard. It's not fully mature, so I estimate that the max rooting depth is about 80 feet. I estimate this is probably about 60 feet as a young adolescent-ish valley oak. Then I've got an urban forest. I've got trees that I do not irrigate in my yard, and then my domestic well we think is about 100 feet deep. So as you can see, if the minimum threshold starts to hit, even at the measurable objective, the goal, my valley oak tree will die. If they aim for this goal, the valley oak tree in my yard will die. My urban forest will die. My well, if it hits the minimum threshold, I'm going to start having serious problems far before that around water quality. And I already can't drink my well water because of the nitrates from ag runoff. So I can only imagine how the water quality will be impacted as groundwater levels continue to drop. Here's another example of this, and I just wanted to talk about, the valley oak is our keystone species. No other tree in the area has a deeper taproot. And as we can see, measurable objectives across the GSPs, or groundwater sustainability plans, are dangerously close to their max rooting capacity. And as well as, a lot of domestic wells. These are largely privately owned and located in disadvantaged rural communities who under SIGMA, GSAs are required to protect. And many have already experienced increased water pollutants and dropping groundwater levels. And there's currently no mitigation plan in place to protect domestic well users should their wells run dry. And there's also no mitigation plan for tree mortality and stress, increased fire risk from dry fuels, land subsidence, infrastructure repair, asset devaluation, increased liability, and the list goes on and on. So there's currently no mitigation plan in place for those results. I wanted to briefly show this. This comes from a website of Sigma Review, and it took a look at all of the groundwater sustainability plans across the state of California. I've pulled up ours to look at who's protected and who's not. As you can see, 26% of agricultural wells are currently protected compared to only 7.1% of domestic wells. And then you can see the covered but not protected. Essentially, what this is if you're covered and protected, you're within 1.5 miles of a monitoring well, and your well depth is below the minimum threshold. You're covered but not protected, you're within that 1.5 mile radius, but your well depth is not that low. Or you're not covered or protected, which means you're outside of that radius and your well is not at the minimum threshold. So, one of the requirements under Sigma is this requirement that GSAs or groundwater sustainability agencies engage interested parties as well as beneficial users and stakeholders within their development of their plans and management projects. To their credit, the Sigma Review website does give VINA GSA a score of high integration of stakeholder involvement on committees. However, we don't have a lot of great representation from all of the disadvantaged communities or other more vulnerable users. The Mechoopda tribe has an observation seat only. They have no voting power, so they're able to attend meetings, but they don't have a vote in what happens. They have no environmental representative. There is also no small farmer representative, which is defined under USDA as 50 acres or less, or $350,000 of income from your farm or less. And furthermore, they have not clearly explained how stakeholder feedback will be incorporated into its planning process, nor has it identified the methods, criteria, or level of input required for stakeholder feedback to meaningfully influence changes to its plans. So, the Sigma also requires GSAs to protect groundwater-dependent ecosystems. So what are those? Groundwater-dependent ecosystems are comprised of species and habitats that rely on groundwater for some or all of their water needs. California defines GDEs as ecological communities of species that depend on groundwater emerging from aquifers or groundwater occurring near the ground surface. Groundwater supports a wide range of ecosystem types. And GDEs, these ecosystems, provide a number of services to our society, from water quality to stream bank stabilization to flood risk reduction, climate regulation, critical habitat, recreation, as well as spiritual and cultural values, especially for California Native tribes. And the long-term impact, if the groundwater levels continue to drop, is species and habitat loss. Large swaths of riparian vegetation can rapidly die off, and we only have 5% of riparian ecosystems left in the entire state of California. So we've got to protect the little that we have left. This is from that Sigma Review website that shows where does the VINA GSP, their plan, where does it land as far as protecting groundwater-dependent ecosystems? Well, this report found that our current plan protects only 0.2% of ecosystems, ecosystem acres. So that's pretty startling. 0.2% is not a lot. In a review by the Nature Conservancy in Audubon, they found that the GSP left out areas that should have been included within the groundwater-dependent ecosystem mapping and removed mapped areas just because they were near farms or surface water. But unfortunately, that's not a valid reason because these ecosystems can rely on both groundwater and other water sources at the same time. And their plan did not explain how these mapped areas were checked using actual groundwater data. Without this, it will be very difficult to properly track and protect these ecosystems. And finally, our plan does not provide a full list of plants and animals in these areas or identify any threatened or endangered species. Unfortunately, this is par for the course. As you can see here under in this review of all of the GSPs across the state, 91% fail to protect groundwater-dependent ecosystems, 60% fail to protect agricultural wells, and 63% of domestic wells are also unprotected. Again, most failing wells are privately owned and in disadvantaged rural communities. And as I said, more than 90% of California's rivers, streams, and wetlands and other ecosystems that rely on drinking water, or groundwater rather, have been damaged or destroyed by land use changes and water management. And the risk of that habitat from unsustainable groundwater use is really catastrophic. Reducing groundwater use is key to bringing basins back into balance and avoiding adverse impacts to vulnerable users. Yet very few plans describe the need for pumping cuts, fees, or other demand management strategies, despite SGMA giving groundwater sustainability agencies real authority to do so, which is what we're going to be talking about tonight. Fortunately for us, there's a better way. There are these things called ecological thresholds. Ecological thresholds mark the point where groundwater decline causes harmful conditions to ecosystems, leading to habitat and species loss. They can often use rooting depth as a useful management proxy because they recommend that groundwater should actually remain between about 1 meter or 3 feet of maximum rooting depth, depending on soil type, to support ecosystem health. As you can see here, that recommendation says about 4 meters. Currently, the VINA GSA is set at 21 meters. Ecological thresholds don't only protect groundwater-dependent ecosystems, but they also safeguard domestic well users, small farmers, disadvantaged communities who rely on groundwater for drinking water and household needs. And these are all the populations that the VINA GSA is legally required to protect. Thank you so much for your time. Oh, sorry, I didn't announce the next person.
So our next speaker is Cindy Daly, and she's from the Regenerative Ag program at Chico State, and she's going to give us some ideas about what agriculture is doing to help reduce demand on groundwater.
Very good. Thanks, Marty. Let's see if I can get this to advance. Here we go. Nice slide, huh? Yeah. Have a lot of help these days. AI is an amazing tool. And of course, yeah, we have staff at the center. And regenerative agriculture is really the focus of the center, the Regen Ag. We started the center back in 2016. It's been around about 10 years. And our goal has really been to help educate and to transition land into a more regenerative paradigm. And I have a bit of a cold, so I'm going to keep my water really close by. I can't guarantee that I'm not a super shedder, so just keep that in mind. I'm kidding. All right, so I know that the charge was Regen Ag, and I wanted to talk specifically about cover crops. I think cover crops kind of get a bad rep, and I wanted to talk about that because cover crops are a really important component of regenerating your soil, and that's what regenerative ag is. We're about re-enlivening your soil as a valuable resource. It is, the lifeblood of our food system. It is really a resource that I think is really underserved, not necessarily given the kind of respect that it probably deserves. So, a lot of different ways to farm, and a fallow field or a bare field is really not the best way in which to approach soil. and to get soil to function in the way that we want soil to function. Cover crops really help enliven that soil by adding biology, by pumping a lot of root exudates to the biology and really bringing that back to life. And if we treat that soil in a way where we layer in more of these regenerative practices like no-till, in other words, let's take the tillage out. Every time we run a disc or a plow through the soil, we're really destroying the structure of that soil, the architecture. We're breaking down the macropores, the micropores, and we're killing a lot of great biology that actually can work 24/7 to really enhance your ecological system. So that has been the focus of the Regenerative Ag Center, is really to help growers embrace a more biological approach to farming, to really enhance and harness that biological engine in the soil. So cover crops have been criticized because they have a high ET. So there is considerable more evapotranspiration that comes when you've got a cover crop on a field, as opposed to one that you don't have a cover crop on. So, and looking at that ET value, it's often the reason why they don't want you to use cover crops. And that to me is like shooting yourself in the foot, because what we really need to do is encourage growers to use covers. We need to encourage growers to use these no-till practices, compost applications. You layer those things, and the soil begins to function in a way that really benefits everyone, including groundwater, including reductions in water use. Why? Because you just don't need as much. So there is, in fact, some logic behind making the applications of regenerative ag if you really want to use or reduce your water use. So this slide is really talking about that, the fact that, we do have, precipitation and surface water that really provide, the deposits in your water budget. And withdrawals are basically the evaporation and the plant transpiration and surface runoff. So what we really want to do is prevent that from happening. And lots of research on this. Unfortunately, people don't connect dots. And that's where we come in. We would really like to be able to connect those dots. When water hits bare ground, it caps that soil. That'll wake you up. It does cap the soil, and the tendency then is for that water to run off. And it'll take with it whatever is there. So water can dissolve a lot of soil particles. It can take nitrate with it. We contaminate a lot of surface water in that way. And no farmer wants that. No farmer wants to lose valuable resources that they just applied. So that is something that I think is a pretty easy sell. It's low-hanging fruit in many respects. And by adding a cover crop, you really capture all of that water. It is a great way for you to get rainfall to actually incorporate into your soil. So most studies show that there's an improvement of over 40% of water infiltration with a cover crop added to your system. And significantly enhances water infiltration from there. Our own research really shows that in a significant sort of way. And what we also do is that we reduce the amount of evaporation coming from that bare soil. It's not like bare soil, fallow soil does not evaporate water. It wakes up and evaporates. And we've learned that from comparing our fallow field research studies against our regenerative systems. So it is important that we kind of look at that, and how do we balance that? Well, there's other ways to look at water than just ET. We also have to look at the amount of water that is running off our fields. Great way to stop that, especially if you've got any kind of topography that you're trying to cover crops. You can reduce water runoff as much as 70% in sloped fields and reduce that runoff. And then we have to also consider the health of the soil in terms of how porous it is. And porosity comes from soil health. A great way to reduce soil health is to beat it to death with excess tillage and allowing the sun to hit it, and you basically bake it. And by providing cover crops and no-till, you're really enhancing that soil structure. You're creating a sponge. NRCS is very clear. Every 1% increase in carbon in your soil organic matter, you actually enhance water holding capacity by over 20,000 gallons per acre per year. So that, to me, is a great way to hold that water. And what that means is that there's less water required because you don't have to irrigate as often. Soil moisture is held. Porosity means that we're able to get the water to integrate and infiltrate and ultimately perk down into the aquifers as well. So cover on the soil does provide a nice shield overall, so you're able to really protect that soil surface in a way that really enhances the biology. So if you really look at the overall water budget between a bare fallow field and then a managed cover, a regenerative type managed cover, soil evaporation is really, really high on bare soil. And if you go up and down I-5, you see a lot of bare soil. So we're just losing water there. In a managed cover crop, it's very low soil evaporation because of the canopy and the cover. Plant transpiration, there is some evapotranspiration that takes place with the cover. But I think what the point is that we can balance that out with the other water in that budget. So overall, if you're going to be comparing ET back to the baseline where you have no cover, you're going to experience some of that. But we're getting more water infiltration in a cover. So you're capturing more of that water. We just had 2 days of our soil health field days, and it was a really wonderful experience. Day 1 is all about the science, so we had scientists come and talk about the research. On day 2, we had the farmers come. We brought out Rick Clark. He farms 6,500 acres in the Midwest, and he says, we love to talk about rain. We love to talk about rainfall. And coffee shop, my neighbor says, hey, I got a whole inch of rain. Rick. How much did you get? He said, I got all of it. I got all of it. He's been farming regeneratively for decades. And what that means is that nothing ran off. Every drop of rain that he received for free was captured and incorporated into his farming system, into his soil system. So infiltration's a big key. Surface water runoff, another consideration. Cover crops will eliminate a lot of that. Nitrate leaching, if you don't want that runoff with nutrients in it, hitting other surface water, going out to the ocean, and we need cover crops. It mitigates a lot of that. There are some cover crops that can take up a lot of excess N. I mean, farmers don't want to lose that nitrogen. They don't want to do that. It's an expensive input, so that is something that you need to consider. So I think ultimately, really looking at the net benefit of covers and this regenerative type farming system is that you really can be much more water use efficient by utilizing some of these practices and optimizing your water use in a way that not only decreases your cost on farm, but also improves ecological services. We're drawing down carbon at that same time. I think everybody likes that idea. So we actually become a bit of a service to the ecosystem in that way, and that we're pulling down that carbon and enlivening that soil and actually holding more water, and then allowing more water to be incorporated into the ground aquifers. So that is a culmination of about 190 different studies. I mean, this has been very well researched. It's not even a maybe. It's solid work. It's solid. We are also doing quite a bit of work here in California. We've got side-by-side research sites from Chico to Richvale to Lemoore to Blythe. And what are we doing? Well, we're looking at a contrast, a direct contrast between farming systems, between our regenerative farming system and a conventional, our normal traditional types of practices, tillage, no cover. And really we tend to use inputs like fertilizers and herbicides and things like that in our normal practice. In the regenerative one, we actually try to enhance our soil biology so that we don't have as much inputs required in the systems. So we're farming the same crop in the same soil with the same farmer, really looking at the ecological impacts of these two farming systems. It's pretty sophisticated. We do have flex towers, and that gives us real-time carbon movement in the atmosphere. We're getting like 10 readings per second. It's impressive what's going on. We get real-time carbon drawdown or emissions, whatever's taking place out in the field. We also are looking at ET, we use OpenET. We also have some sensors monitoring our evapotranspiration rates. We have some moisture probes that go down to about 48 inches, so we really know what's going on from a soil moisture perspective. And that has been an eye-opener for us. Half the field conventional, half of it regenerative. This is some of our locations. We're in rice in Richvale, we're in cotton in Lemoore, we're in a hay rotation, half grain, cereal grain in Blythe, and then we're doing a cereal grain rotation in Chico. So this is what the setup looks like. It's at scale. These aren't plots. We're talking 30, 40 acres on each side by side. And the little funky figure 8 thing, that's the inference. That's just how much of the atmosphere these flux towers monitor. And those are all of the things that we're measuring. The carbon flux, the soil carbon accumulation over time. We're looking at nutrient analysis in the soil, what's going on there. Water use efficiency, microbial communities, water quality. Agronomic performance, and of course, we want to know how yield goes and in the economics. And out of all of that, the hardest thing to capture is the economics. Because we have to set the farmer down and say, okay, what did this cost? What did that cost? That's the hardest part. So it's capturing farmers who are super busy doing what they love to do, which is farm. And getting that economic data, but we are just about done with economic assessments for 2 years of that study. So ultimately, let me just see if I got, that's what the fields look like. We are taking 15 different soil samples, and I'm getting into the weeds here, and that's what the graph looks like. Why? Because, there's a flux going on. This is daily fluxes, 10 readings a second. It's a lot of data to manage. So I've got a full-time data management person on hire. And her whole job is to do this. It's to summarize that information and give me a cumulative over an entire period of time. And it does take a lot of data crunching to get there. The green line is the regenerative, and the brown line is our conventional contrast. And you can see that overall, the net ecosystem productivity is higher on the regen side. So we are actually drawing down more carbon on the regen side over time. And all those little baubles, that's a cutting of hay. So when he cuts the hay, there's a little drop in carbon flux, right? And then we grow a whole nother crop of hay, and 30 days later, he cuts it again. Dale gets 10 cuttings of alfalfa. Impressive. Yeah. Overall, do we actually have more ET? Yeah, we do have more ET because we've got living roots on that field for an extended period of time. And we have fairly comparable yields as well, which I think is important to kind of keep in mind. But the beauty of the last 2 years is that we have doubled the biology, fungal communities. We've enhanced these aggregates. Look at the difference in that soil. One is very porous, light, and infiltrates almost 3 times faster than our conventional side. We're really enhancing the biology. We're utilizing that biology, making it work for us. So Dale doesn't have to irrigate as much. That's a terrible slide. But suffice it to say that these are all 4 of our research sites, and every one of them saw significant improvements in the aggregate stability of the soil. We did this with that soil, and we started with that. All 4 sites. So, does it work? It absolutely works. We also took soil health metrics. We improved soil health across the board. And, you know, I'm a scientist, so I like my data. I apologize. There's a lot of data here. But the reason I put this here is that this shows all 4 sites. Soil health scores definitely were statistically enhanced. The green bars are the regen side, the orange bars are the conventional side. So, you know, there's no question about that. We are seeing some pretty significant improvements in aggregate stability, soil health, and also in carbon. We're drawing down more carbon. There's more carbon being accumulated, and that means more water holding capacity. That means more biology. That just means we're increasing the nutrient currency in that soil. I tell all my students, carbon is money. We really want to put more carbon in the soil because it's valuable. It's nutrients. Nutrients that can be cycled, fed to the biology feeds your crop. We have mature sites and transitional sites and all of that good stuff. And somehow I ended up with somebody else's slides behind mine, which is very interesting. They're really quite beautiful, Blake, but somehow we merged backgrounds. We're doing quite a bit on water and water quality, and as I said, we significantly improved infiltration. So we're capturing that water. Whatever free water we get, we're capturing it and holding it. And it also means that we're doing a better job with our irrigation water. And at this stage, we're into year 3. Dale is differentially irrigating because he doesn't need to put as much water on the regen fields. Aggregate stability is significantly higher, and this is Sandrine Matyasek. She's our water quality person. We've got moisture probes down 47, 48 inches, and you can see this is the graph of the soil moisture over time. Every time you see a spike, that's probably an irrigation. But look at how much more water the regen side is holding. And this is only after 2 years. So we've only begun to heal that soil. We've only just begun. And it's obviously highly correlated with soil organic matter, just as NRCS said. I mean, it's there. We also look at quality. And this is a little tough one for most of my farmer friends to look at, because the regen side, we're fertilizing with about 20 to 30% of the normal fertilizer, and then we're using compost. And the water quality does show it. We see a lot less nitrates in our soil water. So these are lysimeters that go down to 48 inches, and it's capturing the water coming through that soil. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing less nitrate there. And that's good news for farmers in a sense, because this is a great way to not have to sign the front of the check. They can sign the back of the check, as Gabe Brown would famously say. Why? Because you're buying less nutrients. You don't need as much. And that is the beauty of that. So we're trying to rebuild that biological sponge, try to make that soil start to function the way soil was always meant to function. Farming in sync with the biology, farming in sync with the natural cycles. And so this is really what it's all about with a regenerative, no-till, multi-species cover crop is really to enhance that soil resource so that it captures water, it holds water, and it infiltrates water. And that's what we're seeing. Pretty well on all of our research sites. We're seeing more soil moisture lasting longer after the irrigation. And it's also cooler. The soil is cooler because we've got the canopy, of course. So we're only 2 years into this. We've got a lot of work to do yet to finalize that, because frankly, transitioning soil can take 3, 4, 5 years. So we're really not at our optimal yet in terms of what we can actually achieve, but what we can say so far is that we have in fact enhanced water holding capacity. We've enhanced water infiltration rates. We've improved, the water use efficiency in that they don't have to irrigate as often, so rather than every 7 days, it could be every 10 to 12 days in that part of the world. And if you know anything about Blythe, I think it's hot there in the summertime. It's a little warm. Yeah, my students love going down there in the summertime. Yeah, I have to give them hazard pay. It's hot down there. Anyway, that's basically what I wanted to cover. The regenerative ag approach, I think farming methodology is something that's been underserved in this whole conversation about groundwater sustainability. I think we can reward good practice. NRCS is fully invested in these regenerative practices. I mean, they are all into it and have been at it for quite some time. What's been slow is the rate of adoption. So that's what we've been working on is, we're trying to educate students now with our new option in regenerative ag. So we want to, as students are majoring in plant and soil science, they can emphasize regen ag. We train farmers and we train a lot of technical assistance providers through our certificate program so that we can put more boots on the ground that know specifically how to design farms for regenerative practice and implement them. So that's been really our big focus, and I think a lot of that could really benefit these GSAs in terms of creating these plans where we reduce the amount of water that's required for these farming systems by enhancing our soil health. And we can do it in a way that actually saves money. And that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you very much, Cindy. Now we're going to do a roundtable panel discussion about different ideas for reducing groundwater. So I'm going to invite our panelists up. So Aurelia and Cheetah, Cindy, you're welcome to join us as well, and myself. And I just want to say that the reason why we're doing this is because there does seem to be not a lot of ideas about how to reduce demand. And obviously, regenerative ag is putting forward some great ideas, but we need more ideas. So let's see what our panelists have to say. You want to come up here and speak? I'll go first. Okay, why don't you come on up, Cindy?
No, this is you. I'm sorry, I don't know who's on.
We had a farmer that was going to try and show up, but wasn't able to.
He couldn't, his allergies caught up with him. So, so I'm going to go ahead and talk about I have 3 ideas to share about reducing demand. And of course, one of the big parts about reducing demand is conservation. And so, similar to what Susan was pointing out earlier, the residents of Chico, when asked by Cal Water to cut back in their use of water, was able to conserve 33% during that year of 2015, and it's kept down at that low level. So the residents were able to do that. So I think it's really impressive when people put their minds to things, they are able to accomplish that. So for myself, my first idea is redirecting the water that comes from the Chico water plant, treatment plant, and instead of just putting it into the Sacramento River, it's treated water, it's been purified, but to then redirect it to surrounding lands so it can be used for agriculture. Obviously, that's going to take a cooperative relationship with the city of Chico and the water treatment plant, but it seems like that's good water. Let's do something with that. The second one is to implement more rainwater catchment systems, both in farm ponds and also creating swales, so that as we have good rain times, which we seem to have less of, but when we do, that water can be retained and can percolate more slowly into different areas that could be recharged, as opposed to running off into either storm drains or into creeks. Not that we don't want that water, but at least if we can slow it down, it can go into the upper water table, really. And then the last idea to share is that it was initially proposed by our Butte County Department of Water and Resource Conservation under identifying underutilized surface water supplies. And this is to encourage people who have land along the rivers, both the Sacramento River and the Feather River, to, instead of pumping groundwater for use on their lands for agricultural purposes, to utilize their riparian rights. People who live along waterways have a riparian right to use the water on that land for beneficial and reasonable use. And they should use it. They have a right to it instead of it staying within the water system and going downstream. They can use it on that land. That would then reduce the demand on groundwater of those property owners utilizing that groundwater that they're pumping on their lands. It would require money to incentivize the landowners to do that, because it's going to require a necessary infrastructure to, one, pump that water out of the rivers, but then also to move it into to their land. So there is going to be some cost involved with that. So those are the three ideas that I want to share with you this evening.
Hi, I would first like to start off with my profession. I do fisheries, large-scale restoration projects, and Marty mentioned green infrastructure, looking at swales running off a road system or your communities or within your home, and rainwater catchment systems, and those are really smaller scale methods in order to slow and sink water into and reuse that water locally. But professionally, there's an idea to do that on a larger scale with large-scale riparian restoration, stream enhancement, and that is being implemented as a means to improve flood control systems and as well as groundwater recharge, and to revitalize our natural ecosystems. But that's not why I came here and wrote down some items that I did want to share with you. I mainly wanted to come here tonight to share that there is public resources that are available in order for you as a farmer or a friend or a community member or a local domestic well user that you could access in order to understand how water is being you're utilizing water, how domestic well owners are utilizing water, how much water is being used in your local area. Cindy Daly mentioned OpenET, which is a federally free resource. OpenET uses satellite data to estimate actual water use and evapotranspiration on your particular property for a particular crop type as well as an irrigation type. So it's a very powerful tool that allows farmers to assess their water usage on a daily basis. There's also resources with the Department of Water Resources. They have CIMA stations across California, which are essentially weather stations. I'm reading my pamphlet here. And they provide farmers with a weekly irrigation report for their property. And you're able to sign up for this. It's a free service. It's called the Irrigation Scheduling Program. If folks would like to participate in that program to get email reminders on how much water to use on their property for their crop type, for their irrigation type, DWR offers those services. And there's some information on this table here. OpenET is free, and there's also a friendly, more user-friendly version of that called OpenET Farms. USGS has a water data. Their website provides real-time groundwater, stream flow, and surface water data, which is critical for domestic well owners tracking drought impacts. I mentioned CIMMYS, which is a Department of Water resource. And then UC Agricultural and Natural Resources Farm Advisor. All of these resources I have printed out. There's resources I've categorized for efficient water use, for reducing water on your land, like programs that will help you convert to drip irrigation, programs to help you get a soil moisture monitor on your property, as well as some resources on xeriscaping. There's also resources for the domestic well owners, EPA Water Sense, guidance on water efficient fixtures and practices is just one for an example. And then I've also provided incentive programs to help folks get funding and support. Some of these resources include SWEEP, the State Water Efficiency and Enhancement Program, Healthy Soils Program, HSP from CDFA, NRCS EQIP. There's about 7 or so funding incentive programs here that I've put together. And so I really would just like to help people connect to local data, whether it be, going to the Regenerative Agriculture's website. I was really thrilled to hear about your work that you all are doing. Going to the DWR's website, signing up for their irrigation scheduling program, and looking at their CalCimitah data system, as well as using the federal NASA's OpenET, which provides very accurate ET calculations for your property, for your crop type. And that's it.
Good evening, I'm Judy. So I'm a local farmer. I've been farming in Butte County for about 20 years. Recently I've gone through the certification program Cindy was talking about. So I'm a technical assistance provider in regenerative agriculture and currently work with Community Alliance with Family Farmers, working specifically in Sigma. So this is a nonprofit that works across California advocating and providing support for small farmers. Our group is squarely focused on Sigma, so understand what's going on in Sigma in my region. We've got contractors working out within Northern California, but also we've got people in Southern California as well, all trying to work together to understand what's happening and try to communicate about the differences and the similarities between these GSAs, and then communicate that to growers. And then the third component, which is the most gratifying, is a pool of funding that I can provide well and technical support and buy irrigation equipment for farmers so that they have water-saving techniques on the farm. And so I'm going to try and slow down a sec and kind of recap on, so Cindy hit on a lot of it, and I think some of those numbers are significant, and I think it's worth bringing back. So reduction of runoff or improvement of infiltration in cover crop soils improves their porosity. So it just slows the movement of water across the land, allows that infiltration. And so that means less soil is going into the creek, less of the nutrients and or pesticides that have been placed on that soil hits our waterways. And then worth mentioning the organic matter component. So USDA number, as I saw it, 1% organic matter holds 25,000 gallons of water. So as organic farmers, we try to run up our organic matter rates to hopefully 5%. You can push it up to 10% before it can become problematic. And so if you take that 25,000 gallon number and put it across an acre per year, and then take that and put it across all the farmed acreage in our basin, this has major implications for our overdraft, which again, we're running that deficit now. In the last 24 years, every single year as it is now, we've lost about 14,000 acre feet. An acre feet being, again, 325,000 gallons of water. I think comes out to about 4 billion gallons every single year. And it's seesawed, it's gone up and down, but that's where we're sitting currently. It's gotten better in the last few years. And so it's a very, unobserved, underutilized superpower that the soil has that we don't have to just fallow land, because as it is now.
Say that again.
Okay. Starting from where?
All of it, I love all of it.
Okay, so 1% of organic matter per acre per year has the capacity to hold 25,000 gallons of water. Multiply that by 5 now. Okay, so now, we're 25,000 gallons of water per acre per year that is being retained by the soil. So it's not necessarily reaching the subaquifer, but that's water that we have retained and do not have to now pump. Again, an acre foot, and this we didn't hit on this one yet today, 26,000 gallons of water. And so that's the metric we use in this water world that we have. It's a football field of water, 1 foot deep, basically. It's the metric. The deficit that we run in the Vina subbasin, so we're talking Chico to Durham, stops before you hit Vina, the town proper, that region runs a 14,000 acre foot deficit per year in the last 24. So in 2024, we had a 500,000 acre foot deficit cumulatively. That's the deficit we were running. The number is exponential. It's hard to calculate, honestly. And so, this ability to cover crop could potentially add organic matter, improve infiltration, and do a lot of things that are kind of sight unseen. And ET rates this satellite data, so they're taking a look from outer space and they're saying, how green is this? This is our estimation of how much water is leaving the ground through foliage and dirt. So something that's been taught to me early on is that cover crops get read wrong by ET because they look very green. So the assumption is there is a lot of applied water. This is not necessarily true. Evapotranspiration rates in the old school world, this is my textbook from 20 years ago, it's 70% the rate of bare soil. So you're getting a 30% reduction of water loss to the air when you have that foliage covered, when you have that leaf area index, as they use the term. And so there's actually GSAs that exist. East Turlock GSA, they have this program now that if you cover crop, okay, roll it back just one sec. East Turlock, the train has left the station. They have water allocations. They will tell you how much groundwater you can pump for your farm. And you will pay by the acre foot, again, that 325,000 gallons of water. So, farmers will pay between $50 and $150 per acre foot of water per year that applied. So around here, if you're an orchard, use 3.5 acre foot of water per year per acre. And so it's not a big deal if you're a small farmer and the prices are lower if you're using less water. But if you expand that to a 1,000-acre farm, we've got growers that are spending, $15,000 on top of their normal operational costs just to pump their own groundwater. And so that's what we're trying to avoid here. So East Turlock, coming back to it, they've got a program now where you can get 20% free if you cover crop, because they've had this recognition that you get improved infiltration rates, you get this organic matter, exponential, you build 1% one year, 2%, if you don't till, if you don't burn it off right away, you can create this incredible water holding sponge underneath your farm and actually contribute to the system rather than be a detriment. And so there's many ways of doing these things. And so just to finish real quickly, part of what I've gotten to do on some farms is we install these smart meters that communicate with their irrigation system. So This farmer can look at his phone, know exactly how many gallons per minute he's utilizing on his farm. It'll tell him, it'll send him an alert if a pipe breaks somewhere in the field and he's wasting water. And it will also read the weather reports and reduce irrigation based on what the forecast is. And we can see 30% reductions in water use just with that. We can add moisture probes with that. We can put in-field meters and tell exactly what's going on. We can put specialty valves in the field that will reduce water use in parts of the field that tend to be soggy, so we're not wasting water and wasting crop efficiency in parts of the field that don't need that much water. So there's a lot of technological advances that are happening right now, and it's like not expensive stuff. And so there's other opportunities that exist other than just fallowing, and that's the direction we're going right now in the Vine Subbasin.
Can I just say two things? Of course, yeah. You know, we only have so much farmland, and we only have so many farmers. You know, it would be great if we were incentivized to really value and take care of our soil and to take care of our farmers, because they are really the heart and soul, you know, of our food system. So I worry when people talk about fallowing and we're going to be more, you know, we're going to save water. Well, what about those livelihoods, and what about that farmland? So if they have to sell their farmland, what happens to that land? Well, somebody's going to put houses on it. And is that more sustainable? Is that good for our food system? Is that more food secure for our nation? I don't think so. You know, so I do think that we have a lot of farmland that is going out of production on a daily basis, and that is not good for us. That is not food security. It doesn't mean, you know, we don't want people pumping willy-nilly. That is also a problem with water management in this state. But there's got to be a better way than forcing a lot of these farmers out of business. It breaks my heart. I know a lot of these growers down in the Central Valley. And, you know, and they're trying to farm on 2.5 acre-feet of water. That is a lot of stress on an already overburdened system where they've got all these regulations in the state of California. It is a difficult place to farm. So try to put on, you know, that farmer perspective when, so let's not beat up our farmers. Let's figure out how we help and support them and help them to adjust and to adapt into a drier environment. Let's give them some alternatives, you know, to pumping. They're pumping because they don't have any other alternatives. So, you know, maybe more surface water infrastructure, whether, you know, that's more storage or more conveyance. I don't know, and I don't know if that's, you know, even something. I doubt this crowd is very excited about that, but I will know it's being discussed. You know, it is being discussed.
May I ask, what does an acre-foot of water cost in, say, Durham, as opposed to Turlock?
Well, we've got an almond grower right back here. She could probably tell us exactly what it costs. What are you getting charged for water per acre foot? Are you on surface water or well water?
Me?
Yes.
We had to sell our ranch 4 years ago.
Oh. And why? Can I ask why?
My mom died,
Oh.
and there was no one to take over the ranch. And then we had 2 hard freezes, and just were hemorrhaging money. And then our well went dry, and we were pumping sand.
So I want to thank our
Presenters.
I really appreciate that point that is being emphasized, and that is we want to protect our farmers. How can we support our farmers, especially locally, since that's such a big part of our activities here? Blake, how do you advance these?
Oh, it's just a outage.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So that was the round table with some ideas, and I want to just make a few comments before we start to shift direction. And that is, we need to be clear when we're discussing reducing water demand. If it's going to be primarily affecting the upper water table, which is generally from the ground down to about 150 feet, which is where our groundwater dependent ecosystems are, our rivers, our creeks, our domestic well owners, our smaller farms. Their wells don't go that deep. Some are having to go deeper. Or if we're doing reduction demand, that's going to be affecting the deeper aquifer, which for us is the lower Tuscan, because that's where the bigger ag wells are located, as well as municipal water. So for us, it's Cal water for the residences. And those wells are from 300 feet down to, on the eastern part of Lower Tuscan, down to about 1,500 feet. So when we're talking about which area are we reducing, so I want people to kind of have that clear in their minds. Upper water table versus the lower water table. They work together. The lower water table, the aquifer supports the upper water table. It supports the different systems that we have, but they are separate in terms of where we're drawing from. And so when we're trying to meet our sustainability requirements, we want to make sure that the projects are focusing on one or two of those, either through recharge or reducing demand. And although we've artificially recharging a basin can be beneficial, as you've heard, reducing demand or conservation of groundwater ought to be at the forefront of all projects under consideration. Artificial recharge projects are costly and experimental in many cases and can have unintended consequences, both hydrologically and with legal implications of water rights. SGMA, and hopefully everybody's now familiar with SGMA, and I know the acronyms are tough, but that's one that you really want to kind of lodge in your brain, requires that the groundwater basins are in balance. So let's see what we've got going here. The groundwater that goes into a subbasin needs to be equal to the groundwater that is taken out of the basin. Maintaining the sustainability of groundwater is like a checking account. The terms of calculating a water budget or maintaining a safe yield for a subbasin is part of the equation, as is having a water deficit or being in overdraft. So the sustainable yield that has been determined for the Vina subbasin is that of withdrawing 233,500,000 acre feet of groundwater. Being aware that it is known that agriculture here draws on 90% of the Vina groundwater, annually leaving 10% used by the Chico residences and businesses. Using those percentages, hypothetically, that computes the Chico residences and businesses using about 23,000 acre feet annually of groundwater, and agriculture using about 210,000 acre feet annually. Since in 2015, when we saw the Chico residents were able to conserve or reduce their demand on groundwater by more than 1/3, it seems plausible to believe that agriculture groundwater usage could be reduced by half of that, or 16%. This reduction in water demand would be a savings of 33,000 acre feet of groundwater annually, making up for the current groundwater deficit. Our deficit right now for Vina is 20,000 acre feet. Grant-funded projects ought to support the agricultural efforts for both large and small farms to reduce their use of groundwater. And obviously, looking at some of the regen activities, some of the things that Cheetah was talking about, those are some of the projects that should be supported. The outcome of these projects should impact both the pumping from the deep aquifer, the lower Tuscan, and the shallow or upper water table that impacts the urban forest, the groundwater dependent ecosystems, the shallow wells of both domestic users and small farmers, and the city residences' landscaping. I don't want to start having to water my trees because the groundwater has dropped so low. I would prefer that the groundwater table stays high. So looking at the Vina subbasin, which is 200,000 acres of land and borders up to the Tehama County in the north, east to the ridge towards Paradise, west to the Sacramento River, and south to the other subbasins that fall also under the Butte County jurisdiction, we want to make sure that this area, we're being thoughtful about the projects that we're going to be pursuing. The Vina subbasin has been determined to have a deficit of 20,000 acre feet annually in groundwater. Groundwater in our region, in the deep aquifer, has been determined to migrate from the northeast to the southwest. So when pursuing water reduction and recharge projects, it's paramount to work closely in a coordinated fashion with our neighboring subbasins. So this slide, sorry, I should have shown that earlier, just shows the comparison between ag and municipalities' use of water, as well as the businesses, but it's pretty much water from by Cal Water. So, the interbasin conditions and coordination, it's critical. And Sigma outlines this, that we're required to do interbasin coordination. And the Butte County Department of Water and Resource Conservation has taken a lead in this undertaking. There is, however, a frustrating history with these types of efforts, with numerous integrated regional water management plans and memorandums of understanding being pursued amongst our neighboring counties prior to the passage of Sigma. The previous efforts did not lead to a coordinated approach between counties and irrigation districts about groundwater extraction. So we're hoping that this new approach that's being pursued under the leadership of our Butte County Department will be more effective. We have shared boundaries, and this includes the sharing of information and also the use of common modeling. So, as this slide points out, the interconnection of subbasins means we cannot work in isolation. Water management decisions and actions in one subbasin can impact aquifer conditions in a neighboring basin. As the water moves, it doesn't stay just right underneath us, and the water in the lower Tuscan, underlying Butte County, migrates southwest. So, some of the things that are being paid attention to with this interbasin coordination is addressing the minimum thresholds and the measuring objectives and the differences between our shared boundaries. That's number 2 listed here. I think that's the most important to point out. And then number 5, coordinating on model-based boundary flow analysis, so that we are talking to each other, we know what's going on, and we're sharing that information. So this shows our different boundaries. The coordination effort is actually now looking at the Sacramento River corridor, the basins that line the Sacramento River, but you know, we bump up against Tehama County in this basin, and we all affect each other. So something that has come out as the subbasin information has been, the plans have been analyzed, is that the differences in different subbasins are using different criteria to establish their minimum thresholds. And so it results in different minimum thresholds between the different subbasins. So for Vina and Corning, and at their boundary, Vina's minimum threshold is 59 to 68 feet lower than Corning. So we would be waiting before we determine that we have adverse impacts until we get a lot lower than Corning. Probably not a good idea when we're trying to pay attention to this water that's flowing one direction. And at the Vina Butte subbasin boundary, Vina's minimum thresholds are 25 to 59 feet lower than the Butte basin. And so we really need to become more in line with our neighboring subbasins. These differences in defining undesirable results, when they start to occur and when we start to pay attention to them and have the red bells going off, can result in a very different approach in how we establish policies. So with the coordination, we've got the basins that are part of the Sacramento River corridor listed here, and the next column is the average annual groundwater overdraft. So Vina we know is 20,000, Las Molinas is 2,500, so a lot less. Butte Basin is 2,000, Red Bluff is 10,700, Corning is not at a deficit, and Colusa, which is on the other side of the Sacramento River, is 28,000. So they're probably needing to pay attention like we are. The next columns listed here are showing where there were corrective actions pointed out by the Department of Water Resources in the groundwater sustainable plans and where they needed to be rectified. And so everybody has an issue with groundwater levels. Land subsidence, everyone has an issue with. We haven't seen that many problems here. Corning seems to be an area that has shown some land subsidence. The interconnection between our surface water, our rivers and creeks, with the groundwater and monitoring that, most of the areas do. And then water quality is only in 3 different subbasins, and the water budget also. So we do have similar issues amongst these areas. So if we can work more effectively with our neighboring subbasins, not only will we be protecting the groundwater more efficiently, but we will be able to share information and approaches to becoming more sustainable within our region. We don't live in isolation, and it is important to realize that. The water doesn't stop just because this is an artificial line that's been drawn there. So, what do I want to say before I finish and pass it over to Aurelia? Many of the neighboring subbasins, well, I've already talked about that. So I think the last thing I want to say is the groundwater sustainable plans were submitted in 2022. There are annual updates to these plans, and at 5-year intervals, which we're coming up to, amendments or more significant modifications to improve the plans are to be submitted to the state. It's the reason why we're doing this forum, and both of these forums. We want to make sure that the public is, 1, knowledgeable about what's going on with our groundwater, and 2, become active participants in providing input on how we can improve our plans so that our groundwater is going to be sustainable, and the different ecosystems, the people with more shallow wells, the farmers with shallower wells, and our groundwater dependent species are protected. The amendments to the plans are due in January 2027, and the Department of Water Resource and Conservation and the agencies with oversight of the subbasin's health are collecting input now for these amendments. It's the reason why we're having these forums, because we want you to be knowledgeable and participate with whatever is being submitted for improvements to the plans. I'm going to turn it over to Aurelia so she can give you some information now about where we're headed.
So I'm going to finish up our last slides. Some of this information was presented during the first forum, but this first slide is really introducing that Butte County as part of, essentially acting on behalf of the BINA GSA's staff, essentially, and operating under, right now, partially from a DWR, $5 million DWR Sigma Assistance Grant, held 5 stakeholder meetings, for 5 for each stakeholder group. So there was 1 meeting for each stakeholder group. This was held last year, roughly around October to December. And these stakeholder groups included a local expert group, an environmental representatives group, a domestic well owner group, an agricultural users group, and I think here the stakeholder advisory committee is here. But so I guess that was really only 4 stakeholder groups and then meetings conducted to really get the input of these water users and advocates. And they had, this slide was taken from Butte County after the assessment of the inputs of these stakeholder groups, and there was really some cross-cutting themes of interest from these stakeholders. So one is that the MT, or minimum threshold methodology, directly affects well vulnerability. Support for refining and expanding monitoring networks is needed. which is something that is being done through the Sigma grant, and desire for transparency in monitoring point selection. So there were some questions about what was the criteria and why did you select new monitoring wells for to improve our GSP understanding. And then general openness to domestic well mitigation programs. This was mentioned earlier, but essentially that there's not any mitigation measures if there were undesirable effects given the low minimum threshold. So if a well goes dry, or there's groundwater dependent ecosystems that are dying, or our urban forest in Chico, which we are very proud of and love dearly, if those die, what are the mitigation measures? What is the path forward in trying to set those correctly? Recognition that data gaps remain. So these were cross-cutting themes across all interest groups during those meetings. And then there were some areas of divergence between the stakeholder groups, particularly around the minimum threshold methodologies. So there were groups that generally advocated for protection of groundwater-dependent ecosystems and believed that minimum thresholds, that methodology that is currently being used, should be amended. And minimum threshold values, this is what's described minimum thresholds, if I can recall your memory to Blake's slides. Minimum threshold values should be more protective or higher, versus a stakeholder group basically thought that the current minimum threshold methodology should remain, or that more data needs to be collected. So they defer amendments to minimum thresholds until more data is collected, and concerns about economic impacts of minimum thresholds changes. So those were the basically the suggestions from these stakeholder groups. But there are also the DWR key recommended corrective actions, which were given to the Bynum GSA and directed to Christina Bug. There were 6 corrective actions. These are corrective actions written by DWR and that need to be corrected in the upcoming GSP. And if they're not, then essentially our groundwater sustainability plan could be deemed as inadequate, for example. And these slides, there's only 2 here, 2 out of the 6 that are supposed to be deemed as more, as concerning. This was corrective action number 3, so to provide sufficient information on potential impacts to beneficial users. And revise the definition of undesirable results to remove non-dry year conditions. And then quantify domestic well impacted by proposed minimum thresholds, and evaluate how proposed minimum thresholds may impact other sustainability indicators like groundwater storage, depletion, and interconnected surface waters. I have the DWR's all 6 corrective actions here if anybody is interested. This was number 3, and the other that is of interest is number 6. Corrective action number 6 states continue to fill data gaps and work toward the development of interconnected surface water sustainable management criteria, as well as prioritize collaboration with local, state, and federal regulatory agencies, as well as interested parties to better understand the full suite of beneficial uses and users that may be impacted by surface water depletion introduced by groundwater extraction. And these are collectively the group's considerations for GSP's amendments. I'm going to ask Marty if this is the groundwater users of Butte County, or not AGBC, but groundwater for Butte. Yes, groundwater for Butte's considerations of amendments. So these are groundwater for Butte's considerations. 1, raise the VINA minimum threshold essential to reasonably protected beneficial uses and users of shallow groundwater. And revise the definition of undesirable results to remove non-dry year conditions. And remapping the groundwater dependent ecosystems, or GDEs, for the 3 Butte County subbasins with the inclusion of biologists and botanists. And include well mitigation programs for loss of shallow wells. And lastly, provide cost-benefit analyses to prioritize projects prior to submittal for grant funding. And I'd lastly like to introduce revised methodologies that have been suggested for resetting or resetting minimum thresholds. These are recommended methodologies for minimum thresholds versus the one that we have right now. So option 1, calculate the minimum thresholds for the updated RNS's polygons for the expanded monitoring network based on the 2022 GSP methodology using the updated domestic well inventory information. Can someone refer to RMS polygons?
Those are the RMS are the monitoring well sites.
Okay, yeah, it's like a system.
Representative monitoring sites, so they're the ones that have the MTs and Os assigned to them.
Okay.
So polygons are the areas associated with that.
And the
Wow.
polygon is 1.5 miles out.
Well, that's how TNC evaluated things.
Oh, okay.
That's what that's from. These polygons are basically each well, the subbasin is divided up into polygons based on where these monitoring wells are.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so again, calculate minimum thresholds for the updated representative monitoring system polygons for the expanded monitoring network based on the 2022 GSP methodology using the updated domestic well inventory information. So that's another option for calculating minimum thresholds, number 1. Option number 2, calculate minimum thresholds based on historical minimum groundwater levels minus an agreed upon buffer. And then option 3, consider retention of the current minimum thresholds and monitoring network as a reference point. So that concludes the slides this evening. I believe Susan's gonna come and
I'm just gonna, we're gonna say goodnight. No.
say goodnight. Yeah, tell us goodnight. Well, thank you.
Okay, that is a lot of information and a lot of good information. All right, I understand, and Christina, right over there, who's been so good. Between April and August, you folks are going to be compiling and analyzing and processing all the data on all your different projects, your feasibility projects, is that right? And are you planning on having other public forums like you did with the leg and the domestic well owners? Are you going to have more of those?
Yeah, I would say so. So 2 things are happening. There's a number of grant-funded projects that are exploring different recharge and demand reduction strategies, and a couple of them end at the end of this month. So those reports and things will be available in the next couple weeks. I would expect, by mid-April, and then we'll try to make them digestible. Right? We're going to end up with a stack of a lot of detail in these reports, but just trying to package them in different ways to make them digestible. So that's one thing. And then as far as the periodic evaluation and some of the potential plan amendments, that will really be occurring over the April to August timeframe that you identified at the SHAC and the GSA board meetings. But yeah, we expect to have public meetings in different ways. I think hopefully some just sit around the table and let's talk about and ask questions and have kind of informal dialogues. And then I'm sure we'll have at least one bigger public meeting like this.
Okay, and then, so the best way to find out about all this scheduling and the meetings is to go to your Vina GSA and it says contact us or stay in touch or something, and then you just fill out your email and then you send out all these notices, right?
Yeah, join the contact list if you want wanna get meeting notices, there's a calendar on there as well, if you just wanna look and see what the schedule of events is. But yeah,
Yes.
join the contact list.
And Marty, you had that, how to get in touch, you had the,
Ways for the public to get involved.
yeah, are those up there?
It'll be at the door as people leave.
Okay, so there's going to be information gathered and analyzed and then disseminated. So if you're interested, there's different ways you can do that. I would suggest that you go over and look at all of that information that the Department of Water Resources has compiled. And then this is from you, right? And how to get in touch about the water and how to, all those different agencies that can help you. All right, because, so the goal is to have these projects, have evaluation, have the public input, people can suggest amendments, we're gonna follow through and see how many of those get put in, and that they want to have everything kind of shovel ready by what, fall, so that when the money comes in January, you guys can submit for that, right?
Yeah, I think on the planning side of things, we have to submit the periodic evaluation by January, and then there's Proposition 4, you may have remembered voting on a big bond. So there's another chunk of kind of state grant funding for groundwater management and sustainability, and it's really project focused. Like, I think they're done funding planning and really want to see things built and happen, and so that's what you were referring to, yeah.
So so stay in touch, stay on top of it, think of your amendments, offer your ideas, because the public, we really want the public to be aware. And also contact your county board's supervisor or your city council member, expressing your opinion and your suggestions. Ultimately, it is the board that has the final approval of any project submitted to the state. But the Vine GSA board has representatives from the city, Durham, and the county, and they will welcome your ideas as well. Write a letter to your editor. Come to a board meeting. Let them see that the public cares about the use and direction of the future of our groundwater. So thank you all for coming.
Questions?
Oh, Marty, yes. Oh, and one more thing. If you haven't signed up out there, if you signed up last week, I already captured your email. And if you haven't, sign up out there. I have an email sort of distribution list that I can send out and remind people about meetings and stuff. So if you'd like to receive one of those, make sure you sign up outside on the sign-up sheet. And go there, go there.
Questions?
Yes. Oh, yeah, do you have, yeah. Are there any questions?
Did anybody fill out a question card that you would like us to address?
Oh, yes.
Or you just have a question? Cindy has need to leave because she has to go somewhere. So it looks like there's a question at the back. Yes?
Excuse me, I arrived a bit late. Where can I access the recording of this?
Oh, there is a recording.
Right.
Okay, that's right. BEC on the Beck website and the Groundwater for Butte, G4B, is that what it is?
Right, so Groundwater for Butte,
Ground-
Butte Environmental Council, their websites.
Okay, and because they have been recorded both weeks. Okay, any other questions? Yes?
So you put up a slide that showed that the sustainable yield is about 235,000 acre feet.
Correct.
There are approximately 100,000 acres of tree crops in Butte County, or in the Vine subbasin, I should say. Each one of those acres is using about 3.5 acre feet. So 3.5 times 100,000 is 350,000 acre feet. So there's quite a bit of disparity between what's being put onto the tree crops versus what sustainable yield is. So how do we close that gap? And I don't see anything coming out that's saying how we can, reduce the use of water by 120,000 acre feet just on tree crops. That's not counting rice at all. So,
So as you know, rice is primarily surface water, and orchards is primarily groundwater. And that, of course, doesn't include the municipal use that we all know is about 27,000 acre feet. So you're questioning, it sounds like, where did that 233,000 acre feet come from? And I would imagine it came from the consultants who were working and developing that plan. I'm not going to put Christina on the spot to come up with an answer for that, but I think it's worth questioning, is that a number that we can be working with? Because that's obviously something that we need to be paying attention to. We're reporting it to the state. So it sounds like maybe it needs to be, at least in your estimation, it needs to be revisited with the number of orchards that we have in the Vina subbasin and a number of acre feet that it takes to irrigate those fields. I don't remember seeing a slide in here that shows the number of years that we have met the 2,000 and when we've gone over that, because we've had to pump more because the water was down. Here, this is the slide here, the 233,000 acre feet. So this is for the different years starting, I think, with 2013 through 2023. The sustainable yield is the line across the top. Anything above it means that we've had to pump more. Anything below it was an exceptionally wet year, and so we didn't need to pump as much. So how about we make sure that the feedback goes to the department and then to the consultants about how did that number come up? What it was based on, because it does seem to be questionable. And I think Christina has written it down.
Lake may have an answer.
I don't have an answer, but I have a kind of an associated question that maybe is directed at Cheetah, which is that county that is really turning a page with their groundwater levels, but they've had to come in and start charging a fee for the amount of groundwater being pumped. And I know that there's a deep desire to avoid that regulation of people telling you how much you can and cannot pump. But we've talked a lot about protecting farmers tonight, and I want to be clear that we need to protect small farmers. And I'm wondering if that fee cannot be based on percentage of acreage, much like the voting for the Tuscan Water District was based on. If we could have a fee based on percentage of acres, so the people that were using the most groundwater were paying a larger fee, and that would incentivize actually having an incentive with some teeth to get these biggest users to actually implement these strategies that we know reduce demand. And so why is there hesitation around that? I know for big ag why there's hesitation around that, but for smaller farmers, if there was an equitable percentage or fee, do you think that would fly?
So this is something that is getting flown in, I'm going to say around the Cuyame Basin. So if you buy a bolt house carrot or a Grimway carrot, it comes from there basically, and so they're accountable, of the farms, they're accountable for 90% of the use of water, and the small farmers who are experiencing dry wells are accountable for 1%, and they're charged uniformly, and so they're starting to look at a ramped system for, like if you utilize less than 5 acre feet, which is kind of nothing for most, if you just got 2 acres of veggies or something like that, your veggie farm, 1.5 acre feet per acre, maybe 2 acre feet per acre. So if you're a small veggie farm, you'll be paying nothing. I would call it a de minimis user. Like a lot of small farmers in other regions, the small growers are getting lumped into this category where you pay nothing, and then they are letting that roll over to the larger pumpers. They're looking at Yolo County, they just put a temporary moratorium on large wells because this Australian olive company was going to come in, and so they're looking at potentially ramped fee structures there. So it's not off the table, but you have the people with the money to fight it, and then you got the small growers that are panicking because they don't have recourse. And in general, the way the GSP here is structured now, like, we're not gonna meet the minimum thresholds. The danger, I think, in there lies is that you can still observe an undesirable result, and here the risk would be land subsidence. It's happened in Arbuckle, it's happened in Otoyas. You know, if you draw down the upper aquifer enough and you remove the pore space from the confined layer that separates the upper from the lower, there's nothing to say, because we've never been here before, that that couldn't collapse. And it's just an unknown. And if you get collapse, then you get land subsidence, and that's an undesirable result, which without hitting the minimum threshold. And so, like, this is just, you know, spitballing. You know, it's not to say it's going to happen, but, you know, land subsidence is a thing that drove Sigma into place, where in the San Joaquin Valley, they saw elevation drops of like 30 feet. You know, bridges are collapsing into creekways, wellheads are collapsing into the earth, and that's, you know, a big trigger for this legislation. And so, you know, we're not there yet, but, you know, here we have another really wet winter and a really lousy snowpack now. And so it's like, these things are very unsure, and things are changing. And, you know, I heard the term recently, like, water moves slow, and it's like, water moves slow and decision-making moves fast. And, like, to reconcile these things, I think, is a real challenge.
I like that ramped fee structure, though. And the fact that small farmers won't be punished for their groundwater use, I think is great, because small farmers are hurting, like, really bad. A lot of these big industrial farms have already really decimated your ability to grow nuts and be, you know, economical, actually make any money, because you can't compete with economies of scale. And these are the biggest users, and they have the most power, and they're dictating a lot of these plans. So I think that ramped fee might be just the incentive we need to start to actually reduce.
What kind of fees are called?
Just a percentage based on.
It's a groundwater pumping fee. So, like, in a lot of these southern counties, they say, okay, you can put a meter on your well, you can pick between OpenIQ, or OpenIQ, right?
OpenAT.
OpenAT, thank you. OpenAT, you know, Land IQ, I'm confusing the two. So basically, pick which satellite data service you want that will estimate your groundwater usage based on the greenery of your land. Or you put a meter on at the cost of like $1,500 and self-report that way. And then no matter what, you will be charged on your groundwater usage. And then in certain places, you can pump up to a certain amount, and then you start paying fees. Other places, there's penalties, and some farmers are just using, like they say, that's the cost of doing business, I'm gonna continue to pump. And then little guys get left out, and, you know, they can't pay those fees. They get like a shriveled nut crop, nobody will buy it. The land goes upside down, they can't afford the payments, the bank owns the land, and now we got a bunch of land that's owned by the bank, land values go down. And so, like, there can be, you know, crap can slide uphill sometimes too. And so, like, those are all these kind of like downstream effects. You know, it's like I was talking to a beekeeper. He's like, yeah, less trees in mean, you know, I can't run as many hives this year. Like, the hullers, you know, lose out. Like, the laborers lose out. There's this whole downstream effect of, like, if the big guys lose out, little guys lose out too.
Wow. So,
Are there any other questions? Okay, so there's going to be a lot going on with water. Stay tuned. Hopefully you got signed up. Greg has a handout for you for different ways that the public can get involved, and he'll be handing that out as people leave. And so thank you very much for coming and your interest. And talk to your friends and neighbors. That, we think, is really important. Get the word out that because water is critical. It's critical because we are walking bags of water.
that's right.